They're super predictable, ultimately, Kevin, because the conversations are more often people avoiding responsibility, right? Because we figure out, hey, this is our mandate. We need to grow the business by, 30%, or we've got a competitor who's eating our lunch. So we figured out we need to increase revenue. And ultimately, this is your MBA in one sentence, right? Increase revenue, reduce, manage risk, right? Those are the three things that any business is always about, whether it's a startup or whether it's a multi 19,000.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to the Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we're joined by Hendre. Welcome to the show, Hendre. Well, how do you get coaching engagements for those like CEOs and all that sort of stuff? It sounds like that's the dream for a lot of coaches.
It's not the place to start. Many people have a hard place to start. And I find 2007, 2008, where I got to run a coach training company. At the time, it was called the Behavioral Coaching Institute. And I was very, very fortunate. I had trained with them 1999, 2000, which is long before many of the current coaches were born or started in coaching. But I did some training, and they were based out of Australia. And Suzanne Skiffington, who started that organization, was one of the first therapists that went into the business world. She was invited to teach at the business school in Sydney at the time, created this behavioral coaching methodology. She was one of the first people to kind of coin what we now know as executive coaching. And she had an opportunity for somebody to run the US version of that. I applied, and she's like, hey, because we had worked together, she's like, I'm going to give you the opportunity. It wasn't like somebody was going to buy a franchise. She just gave it to me. Well, that sounds a little weird that you would just give it to me. And she said, I have cancer and I'm going to die in 6 to 7 months. And I don't know of anybody else who could run it. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. And she said, well, why don't you just say yes? So I said yes. And I got to run this division, which allowed me to teach at Harvard. They would never let me see at Harvard, but I got to teach at Harvard because I was representing this organization, right? So 31 years old, teaching at the Harvard Faculty Club on the neuroscience of change and transformation because somebody else gave me an opportunity. So, I'd love to tell you I did all these things and that's how I got there. I had a bunch of opportunities and doors that opened for me that I took, and I said yes. And I did the work before I honestly and got there. But let me get back to some practical stuff because I'm giving you the narrative story. One of the biggest challenges for coaches is that they start off with you try to start at the top. The number one thing to do is you got to create value for people. And I think the number one value that coaches today can give to people is 2 parts. One is a framework, and the second piece is a witness, right? A witness to people's engagement and participation. The reality today is that AI can do a lot of really good coaching. It does. Whether you're on Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, a little bit less so, but I think Claude and ChatGPT, and I like for a lot of things, but not for coaching, right? So I think Claude and ChatGPT, if you say, hey, act like my coach, give me the answers, it gives 86, 90% of what it says is similar to what I would say. I think it's actually good. It's really good. But people don't change because they have new information. If that was true, then lots of people would have changed, right? So people change because they have a framework in which they can exercise that new information. And that's ultimately what coaching provides, right? It provides a very simple, clear framework for people to exercise into their potential, into their goals, their mission. And so the first thing that a coach should work on if they're developing their career is building simple, basic frameworks that their clients or their target client can access and deliver results. And the challenge is people try to buy the framework or they try to do the online framework rather than have something unique that they provide. My framework is very simple. I do turnarounds or I help accelerate growth. It's simple. The need is very simple. And I enter into an organization and I give you the methodologies. There's no rocket science by it and anybody can use it. I've mastered it, right? To as much as I can. I'm still a student of it. First thing to do is what's the mandate? What are we trying to do here? Be very clear about the goal and the mandate. And then a reality check, right? Calibrate where you're at, similar to when you navigate in a car, where are we going? And then it calibrates back to where you are and gives you a framework or a set of steps. And I ask 4 simple questions, Kev. What's working? What's not working? What's missing? What do we need to do? And that opens up a can of worms and multiple conversations. And the skill set that I developed is to have that conversation in a group setting. Most coaches do one-on-one coaching with individuals. The work that I do mostly is to put a executive team or a leadership team together in a room, figure out that mandate, and have the difficult conversations out loud. And if I say there's one thing that I master really, really well, is how to navigate difficult situations in a group and facilitate it. And the way I can do that is because I have a simple framework that I guide people through. There's a simple process that I go through. And I've done the same thing essentially for the last 25 years in different environments. And the better you become, the more people trust you with more environments that have bigger impact. I.e., now I'm with a public company or a couple public companies and boom, listen, what do I know about semiconductors or what do I know about the finance industry? But I'm a master of human behavior and I'm a master of managing a framework that produces conversations for solutions.
I'm really curious, right? Like for those difficult conversations that you're talking about, what do some of those difficult conversations look like? What are they about?
They're super predictable, ultimately, Kevin, because the conversations are more often people avoiding responsibility, right? Because we figure out, hey, this is our mandate. We need to grow the business by, 30%, or we've got a competitor who's eating our lunch. So we figured out we need to increase revenue. And ultimately, this is your MBA in one sentence, right? Increase revenue, reduce, manage risk, right? Those are the 3 things that any business is always about, whether it's a startup or whether it's a multi 19,000 people company. Increase revenue, reduce cost, manage risk. And so that's not hard. The difficult conversation is how will we do that? And most often when we're stuck or when we're in a place of growth, people tend to blame. They blame the economy, they blame the uncertainty, they blame the political situation, they blame the other department. And the work is to get people out of a blame conversation into an ownership and personal responsibility conversation as a leadership team. We need to be able to take a look at all the factors, recognize them, but detach from those things and not personalize ourselves and our own identity to it. So the first work is really to get people out of a blame or a victim mindset to an ownership and personal responsibility mindset, which seems simple. And you're like, but that's coaching 101. Tony Robbins does that, unleash the power within. You're right. But that's the same stuff that gets people stuck in a corporate environment. So I've got a very simple framework that I think around. I think alignment, empowerment, collaboration, and then accountability. And then that produces an environment of trust. It's a little bit counter to Lencioni's deep positive of Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a great book. And if you tell people about their dysfunctions, they're like, oh, that's our team. And that's Gary and that's Johnny and that's so, and Sarah does this and everybody knows how to do it. So you identify the problem, but we haven't really figured out the solution. So I wanted to counter that. So, and I don't know where I came from. I don't think it's a unique thought of my own. I think other really intelligent people came up with this, but alignment first. We need to get everybody structurally aligned with where are we going? What are we doing? And then empowerment, which is clarity of role, clarity of what is it that I'm doing? And then collaboration, getting people to work together. And that leads to accountability. And most of the time when I get called, the leader's like, my people are not accountable. They're screwing around, So they want to, this is my problem. I'm like, well, we get to accountability if we have alignment, if we have empowerment, and we have collaboration. But you're wanting accountability, but you're not doing the work on the alignment. You're not doing the work on empowerment. You're not doing the work on collaboration. Accountability is an outcome. It's not something it's not the goal, right? The goal is do the work of aligning, get to do the work of empowering people and collaborating, and then accountability happens.
As you're speaking, so I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm actually a huge jiu-jitsu and MMA nerd, UFC nerd and all that. And it's like at the highest levels at their professions, it's the basic frameworks. I mean, there's only so many ways you can choke people. There's only so many ways you can break an arm, right? But it's those like nuances that like of moving the transitions, the nuances of like those frameworks too. And it seems like you've had a lot of experience.
Well, I mean, if you take a look, It's the day today. It's the 19th of August. So as of today, being originally from South Africa, but love being from America, South Africa is no longer the world champion in UFC, right?
Yep.
Dricus du Plessis just got beat by,
Sorry.
no,
My
it's fine.
condolences.
And no, it was a boring fight, right? It was a fight and finish, but he won. Why did he win? Well, because he grappled better, right? He
Yes.
wrestled better, and he took a simple process, and it may not have been the most exciting, and it may not have been, and people will bag on this, and listen, people will say, what's du Plessis' style? It's crazy. That's his style, and that's the unpredictable. But he lost. He lost because he couldn't win. Right? He couldn't dominate. He couldn't find, in the round there were punches and you were like, oh, there's moments of excitement. Could this turn around? But at the end of the game, the basics of choking the thing out in jiu-jitsu, right? Holding the partner. If you hold, sometimes that's the thing, is outlasting the other person. And so, I believe that, I think there's a lot of things that we can learn along the way, but simple frameworks and guiding people through a framework. And I think sometimes I'll give more thing that I think fundamental as I think about my own coaching thing. I had this unbelievable person who trained me, American-Italian guy, man, looked like the Godfather, sounded like the Godfather, and was just a bull in a china shop, right? But masterful in managing large groups. And he said something to me that never went away. He said, Hendre, the coaching is in the people. It's not in your methodology, and it's not in your knowledge or your experiences. Listen, I come from South Africa. I tell great stories. I have great stories to tell. I help with a narrative, right? But the coaching is always in the people. Your job as a coach is to draw the wisdom, the distinction, the decision out of the people. Every business I go to, every single one, Kevin, they know what they need to do. They know. They're afraid. They're stuck. They're angry. They feel betrayed because somebody screwed them over, or this guy left, or that guy didn't do something. And it's human conditioned things that keep people from their own potential. And my job is to unlock them from that, have them see it, and then choose something different. And listen, I would love to tell you that I'm 99% successful. The truth is, there are sometimes people who choose to be stuck. They know it. My job is to have them see it. But that coaching is in the people. It's not in my masterful, tell a story at the right time. There are healing moments. There are moments that, the penny drops. But the problem with insight, right, or being able to give somebody like an aha moment in a coaching thing is that their brain rewards them for the aha moment. You're like, when you get it, like when you watch a movie, you hear a song, you listen to a podcast, you're like, that's it. I get it. You just got drugged by your own freaking brain, right? You're like, oh, I get it. No, you didn't. You didn't get jack. You just had a drug, your own brain dopamining you into believing that you've changed your behavior. And because you haven't changed your behavior, right? You think different, but you don't do different. And that's the work, is how do I get somebody not just think different, but do different? And you got to bring congruency, right? So I got to think different and do different. But in order to think different and do different, I have to believe different, right? Again, I'll throw Tony Robbins out there because, certainly one of the most successful coaches out there. And if you wanted to do a kind of a personal brand style coaching, he says, people come to him and say, well, coach, tell me what to do. And he says, while I'm listening to their situation or their context, I am asking, what do I need to get them to believe? It's not what should you do. If you don't know what to do, you've got, back in the day, you'd have Google. Now you can AI it. Like, what do I do? AI will give you the answer. You can't say you don't have the information. The 7 steps are there. You can buy a book, listen to a podcast. All the information, this methodology, the structure, all of that stuff is there. What do you need to believe that you haven't believed before? I mean, think about it. When you're in a jiu-jitsu stronghold and the other guy's got the move on you, he's got the same moves that you have or similar training, everything like that. But if you believe that you can do a move, it's in that split second of you acting on your belief that you turn the situation around. But if somebody dominates your belief, you're done before you started.
There's that whole wrestling theory about imposing your will on others and watching them break and stuff. And it is very, very true. Like, it's just so interesting to see.
Well, being the alpha dog in a situation doesn't mean you have to be the strongest or the most dominant. It's just clear about who you are. Allows you, I'm sure, with the grappling that you've done, you've taken out opponents bigger than you, right? because it's not this, it's not how big they are or how strong they are over you. It's how well you can execute on the things that you know and you believe, and in the moment, read the moment and execute on that. To bring this back, Kevin, to coaches who are growing their business, you're going to have opportunities that come your way and you're not going to ever be really ready for them. So take them on and learn some stuff. Take the basics. When I ran the Behavioral Coaching Institute, I had in Brazil, which is as close as I got to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I had this office in Brazil. I remember we took applications for people to get trained in, and there was this one guy, I was on a Zoom call and or a Skype call at the time, and he had all these certificates behind him on the wall of all the courses he's done. I'm like, well, why do you need to do this with me? He's like, no, I believe if I do your course, and then my life will start. And I said to him, I'm like, dude, you're done. You can't come to my course. You can't pay me any money to train you. And he's like, why? And I said, because you haven't learned how to execute on the courses that you already have. Now you're going to come to my course and you're going to pay buco money for it and then say, it's not that great. I can't afford to have you in because you're going to be bad marketing for me. Learn to practice the things that you already know. And then when you practice that, then you can come back and then you can teach something in my class. But if you don't come to contribute, you're just going to be a taker. Learn to practice some of the things that you know. There's a ton of tools out there. There's lots of good things. I know everybody says keep it simple. I really believe have a framework with a beginning and an end. Know your target market and go after it. I will say a couple practical things, Kevin, because I know we're talking a long time and I can get all heavy around stuff. Back in the day, training would get you in. The reality in business is training it's one of the first things that gets cut, right? And in the uncertainty in the current market, being a good trainer or doing entry level stuff for people, I think that's changed, especially if you're trying to do a video product. That's great, but it gets lost in all the things out there. What people really want right now is they want to bring people together, small groups. Doesn't matter which part of the organization you're in, but learn to, if you can have an offering that brings people together in person and can activate the dynamics or the magic of bringing people together, which is a level of vulnerability, willingness to collaborate, a willingness to design things and move the conversation out of, what are all the things that are not working into what do we need to do and get people to commit to that. You can have a great career. It's basically similar to the music industry back in the day when it went from, hey man, I just need once and I could have a hit. And because streaming happened, it kind of killed the whole idea of making music from one hit. Now you have to go back on tour and you have to go do live performances and it's the merch and the show. Coaching is similar. All the information is now streaming, LinkedIn, people buy LinkedIn learning stuff. So if you're going to be in training, but you're not in person, you're going to miss the point. You have to think like a musician. You have to get back on the road, in person, road show, experience, bring the magic there. The coaching is in the people. And the more you're able to do that, the more they're going to trust you with higher parts of the organization.
And so that kind of seems like the marketing strategy then, to be able to hold like in real life type of events or gatherings and stuff too, versus like a Facebook ad or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if you say as a coach, do team building and I work on EQ, that stuff, fluffy, right? I would say, hey, I help synergize teams to optimize their ability to collaborate and work together. And I will facilitate a planning session for you. I will integrate all the EQ stuff and the team building stuff, but let's facilitate a quarterly planning session for your team. That's going to go a much more long way. Don't try to bring your tools. Match with the customer or the client where they're wanting to go. Hey, where are you stuck? If I'm talking to, HR, or I'm talking to the sales, or I'm talking to the product department, tell me where you're stuck in your department. All right, let's do a 1-day workshop or a half-day workshop where we get into it. We talk about what the issue is. And as a coach, do some interviews with some of that you're going to be in a room with beforehand. Figure out the narrative, the story, and then host a 1-day workshop where you take the inside conversation or the rambling that the people have and you put it up on a whiteboard or you put it up on easels, get them to talk about it. And when people distance themselves from their own conversation, where they're like, hey, here's what I've heard you say. Here's what's not working. Here's what is working. Here's what's missing. When people see that, they're like, all right, now what should we do? And don't try and solve the whole company. Solve the next 30 days. What do we need to do the next 30 days? Bring it as close as possible to turning into action. People will walk out of that meeting feeling like they are high on drugs, right? Because they'll be like, we talked about our stuff. We got it out in the open. And yes, there's a risk, Kevin, if you do that, that people bring their difficult conversation in there. And your job is not to fix it, facilitate it, right? Facilitate the conversation, use the whiteboard. There's a lot of skills that you can do to manage that. But if you create in-person experiences someone, that gives you trust at such an incredibly high level. And, part of the challenge for most coaches is you want a platform. So you go and pontificate your story and like, let me teach you the soft skills, everything like that. People can get that online. What they want is you to facilitate their direction and their strategy. And if you as a coach can actually help build a playbook for how do you succeed, you can weave in all the learning and all that stuff, but don't make it about EQ or that's a training day. And most companies feel like we don't have the time for that stuff. So you have to weave it in.
What I like about this strategy too, it's evergreen. It's like, it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. Anything, the demand for in real life events or gatherings is just going to increase over time.
I think, the coaching industry spent, 10 years, or 5 years, I would say in particular, 7 years talking about resilience, how to deal with burnout, mindfulness. All of those things are really important. I think that they're essential, right? How to do resilience, mindfulness, renewal, the neuroscience, all of those things are super exciting. But the challenge with every trend that's come through coaching is it's been commoditized. Then when it gets commoditized, it goes down to who does it free, right? So neuroscience, there's a ton of podcasts on neuroscience. There's a ton of podcasts on mindfulness and all of those things. So when you take a trait or a skill set and you commoditize it, you lose your value. The coaching is in the people. The coaching is in the business. The business mandate drives the value that you bring. What is the business about? I can bring the mindfulness. I can bring the resilience. I can train people on that. But my job is to help them succeed. And as long as coaches feel like I don't get into the business side, I only do the mindful side, then you're irrelevant and you're a cost center. Make yourself essential to the business, right? Now, what does a coach at a football team do? They never get on the field. They don't play the game. The coach is on the sideline helping design the playbook. So I'm there helping design the playbook. I never get on the field. I'm not doing your business for you. I'm not a C-suite. I'm not trying to run your company. I am helping you call plays so that you, the quarterback, CEO, can get stuff done. But I have to be business minded. Of course, I'm going to talk about mindfulness and getting their head in the game and everything like that. But I need to understand the game. And if you don't understand the game that your clients are about, you're going to work with individuals, which is fine. If your strategy as a coach is to work with 100 individuals who you're coaching one-on-one, really, really hard because 90% of the time, the people who individual coaching don't really have money. They don't. They're stuck. I deliberately went into corporate because the clients pay. I have a simple retainer model. They pay me on an annual basis and I don't do time. I don't sell time. I'm committed to them for a year. I can only do 5, 6, 7 clients at a time, charge a lot of money. I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful to be at that place. I didn't start there, but I started out with what's the objective that you had to do, that you're looking to do, and let me help you get there. And I went to the obvious place, which was the sales part of the organization, because you can measure the revenue. Because I worked with people and I helped increase the sales. Was it really me? No, they did the work. They did the hard work, but this coaching. Team wins the game. Guess who also gets a medal? The coach. And he never put a foot on the field. I never scored a goal, but I get a medal too, right? Because I helped you do your best work. And that ultimately is the objective of coaching.
I'm very curious too. Like you mentioned where you are right now with your and all that. And before the podcast, you were telling me that you're referral only at this point. But what did it look like when you first started? I guess, like, how did you price things? How did you? I'm very curious about that. Yeah.
I started out doing personal coaching, individual coaching for people, right? And then the two stories I started out with was individual coaching. I realized very quickly, and this is 2001, 2002. At the time, I was charging people $500 for a 6-week. I actually called it the journey, right? 6 weeks of, where am I at now? delivering results. And I was very driven on, I don't want you to come here to feel better. I want you to drive a result, right? So back in the day, I worked with a writer who wanted their articles published in Esquire magazine at the time. I worked with somebody who needed to grow their business. Like, it had to be some type of measurable result. So I put 5 or 6 people together in a 6-week process, $500 each. What was that? It's $3,000, right? That was my first startup. Let's coach people. And getting those first 6 people was the hardest thing, but I got them. And then they got, and that grew. And over a 4-year period, I probably put around 500 people through that. But the hardest one was the first one. So I coached groups of people through that. And the key was get their results. And, the narrative was, hey, man, if you work with Hendre, he will kick your ass, but you're going to get results. Whatever the 6-week thing was, I hammered on that stuff. And then with regards to corporate, I got the opportunity of one of those guys who did the one-on-one coaching said, man, and he was in continuity, business continuity risk. Like, I've formed a new team. I've got 10 people on my team and I'm a little overwhelmed. I need to do a team building exercise. And I'm like, well, I don't do team building, but let's figure out your 12-month strategy and your 90-day plan. And let's do a planning session on what success in your division looks like. And he was like, oh man, that would be a great help. And, man, dude, I went scan Bain Consulting and everything like that. How do I come up with a strategic plan? Everything like that. And I had a little bit of my own experience, but it was from South Africa, dude. Like, this doesn't apply. It did. And it's just come up with a 6-page document. What do we do first? How do we sequence things? It's not rocket science. You can figure it out. But we spent 2 days. Of course, I did leadership development exercises and team building things in there. But the outcome, the 2 days, was they had a plan for the next 90 days and what they wanted to achieve in 12 months with goals. Who owns what? How do we get there? I helped that leader organize their strategy. And that to him was like, man, dude, this was worth gold, right? And I remember, I think I got paid $2,000 for those 2 days, right? Like in 2001, I was like, score. And then I figured out I could do this on a quarterly basis. And then they wanted me to coach people in between. And that's kind of how I grew it. And then I took big risks and I told people, give me your toughest team that needs to turn around and I'll come in and I will do a turnaround. I will help you figure out what's not working. And rather than trying to get people to kumbaya, I figured out what's the strategy, what's the goal or the purpose or the mandate for that business unit. And then we had the conversations out loud and we put this together in a structure. And there's the ability to take a conversation out of a group of people, put it up on a whiteboard and put some structure to it and help put a plan to it is worth gold. I became really good at that and trained people in it. Kind of how I got.
Yeah. I'm sure you started building a reputation for yourself as the more you were doing it as well over time.
I was very, very lucky, man. I got to work with some really companies and with one in particular, Motor Trend magazine. I don't know if you remember, 10, 15 years ago when people still bought magazines, right? And so when I moved to America, magazines was the thing, right? And Motor Trend, or the company that owned Motor Trend, they had 112 magazines, 600 websites, right? It was a mess. There were 5 Chevy magazines in 2014. 5. Publishing business was just, completely falling apart. And they had this incredible, probably in my opinion, one of the 2 best operating CEOs I've worked with. The other guy was the guy who ran Cirque du Soleil in Vegas, the resident division. But Scott Dickey, who ran Motor Trend, an unbelievable operator, great and fun to work with. But he had a dilemma. He had to take a publishing business, old school publishing business, and turn it into a digital business. And the revenues in the old business was not the same in the new business. And how do you take an old business, turn it into something new and exit in a short amount of time in a business that's disparate? I mean, in his first 6 months, he had to let 200 people out of 900 people go. I mean, it was tough. And there was another riff within 6 months. And so, basically had to bleed this one business to build the other business. And that became the frame. How do we make sure that this business stays alive long enough to draw the cash out of it? You have to reorient the ownership and the board that, yes, this is a cash cow, but it was dying. And the new one that you're creating doesn't have the same revenues. So we're taking a massive risk and we have no choice because this is going away. And we're building this as a big ass bet. And Scott and his leadership incredibly well. They didn't get nearly enough credit for the hard work that they did. And they turned that thing around, changed the brand, changed the organization, and ultimately sold it to the Discovery Channel. And it was an incredible ride. Just my own learning of helping people through a very difficult situation, build something new in the middle of that. I could talk all day about that stuff. That was cool.
I love these stories. They're so interesting. And so many lessons that I kind of extract from this too. One thing that really stands out to me too is you've been able to have these crazy opportunities. I think there's a saying oh yeah, it's luck. There's a concept of luck, but then you also put yourself in those situations where you could capitalize on I don't know if capitalize is the right word, but be in the place of a lucky opportunity.
So shout out to my mother, Kevin. My mom used to say to me, son, say yes, unless God tells you to say no. My mom, deeply faith-based person. And she would say, just say yes. Life is not going to hand you anything. Say yes. So I probably said yes to a lot of things I should have said no to, Kevin. I probably said yes to some more things, but I generally have a higher risk tolerance and a willingness to say yes to something. And, listen, you may have heard there's a thread here of being able to go into group difficult conversations. And part of what I looked was to not personalize other people's upset, right? But facilitate it, right?
Yes, never split the difference.
Yeah, never split the difference, right? He's got incredible learning, but his skill set, he sounds like he's always working with a crazy individual, but he's working with a crazy individual in a group setting. And if you can manage a group upset and unlock the upset from people, bring it outside, right? It's very old framing, no matter what culture you come from, whatever is can be transformed. If you can reveal the upset, if you can reveal the stuckness, if you can reveal the who's blaming who or difficulty, and you can separate people from it so that they can look at it, right? Buddhist philosophy of detaching, Christian philosophy of don't be conformed to it, like being able to take a look at something and say, hey, here's our issue. And if I can separate it and I can look at it objectively, I can shift it. I can change it. But the moment that I think it is me, I am stuck, I am depressed, I am all of these things, then it owns me. I need to separate from it, detach from it. And the work of coaching is to help people detach from their internal conversations or the internal narrative around the business, around the challenge, around the uncertainty in the market, around the politics. I get it. I hear you. It may be true, but that conversation has you. Let's separate from it. And then let's design a way and find a way through it. And if we can align on these are the issues, and we can design and collaborate on some strategies together, we'll do amazing things. We'll do amazing things together. But your ability to manage that conversation is really where the power lies.
You've done so much in your career with all these valuable stories and all that. What's the next chapter for you? What's next for you? Do you have any secret big dreams, secret big ambition? What's
Well,
top
if
of
I
mind
told
for
you, that wouldn't be secret anymore. I'm at a fantastic stage in life, being an empty nester. My kid is doing extremely well, so I'm proud to be her dad. She's doing well. The work I do is meaningful. My current clients are at very exciting positions, couple real turnarounds and couple growth strategy things. I think we're in for a massive opportunity with what's happening with AI. I think we're going to get a new operating model for executives. I think private equity is going to go to more fractional leadership rather than, full-time C-suite folks like that. I think we're going to find that much of the work can be done fractional. Wouldn't surprise me if you find in the future that you get possibly one CEO operator, but the CFO is doing multiple projects. The CMO is doing 2 or 3 projects together, and you have less people doing more fractional work rather than, a small group doing all things. So I think that model is evolving. The use of AI for executives is really fascinating because, yesterday I sat with an executive and, showed them how they can use AI to help bring structure. A very dear friend of mine, Casey Estenson, just brought his book out, The Augmented Leader, of how to use AI as a CEO. I think that stuff is really interesting. And then I think generally, for younger coaches, the desire for human touch, the desire for human connection, and the ability to facilitate strategy and momentum with people in person, I can never replace that. There's an age-old saying that where 2 or 3 are gathered, God is there, or there's magic there. Something is available. You know this, right? If you go work out on your own, you can do really well. But your PBs, that's usually because somebody else is there, right? You've got a spotter.
Yeah, always.
You want to impress them. and you do, you do your personal best. And then you go to the gym, you're like, I can't walk. I can't feel my arms, but I did something. Why? Well, because you had a witness. You had somebody who was with you. And ultimately, what coaching provides is a witness to people exerting themselves into their potential.
Beautiful stuff. I know you mentioned that the whole concept of the witness in the beginning. I wasn't quite sure, but you just definitely cleared it out for me. So I appreciate that. Hendre, how do people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best. My websites are out of date because I haven't needed them or used them for a while. So HendreCoetzee.com is super old.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed, but it is what it is. But LinkedIn is probably the best way to go after it and find me on there. I'm sure you could, if you want, you could post that in your post notes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Well, it's great to talk to you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for making the industry better and bettering coaches out there. And I'm happy to do a part 2 anytime if you want.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.